immersion, a very specific type, because some people don't agree with this, but I'll tell you where I feel it really does apply universally. Immersion gives us effective exposure. Focus on one thing, eliminate switching costs. When we are immersed, we're usually immersed in that one thing. We don't have to keep jumping around. That's very cognitively expensive. We're already expending a lot of our brain's budget on a difficult thing. Why are we constantly switching to? This is where it gets really interesting. Your brain starts to normalize it and says, oh, this is part of life now. Well, we just keep focusing on it. Your brain will think about it while you're not doing it. And this is a really important concept. I've put this term called bog off. When I used to work in a supermarket when I was a kid, you used to have this thing of buy one, get one free, where you buy a packet of chicken and you'll get the same one for free. I like to think about this when you're in immersion mode. When you're doing something a lot, when you switch off, your brain will often start processing things when you're away from it. I used to notice this when I used to dance or snowboard in particular. I'd just be constantly doing it a lot, right? So I'd leave a session being a bit frustrated, be stuck. You go to sleep, you wake up the next day, you haven't done anything more, and then you go out and it's fixed. You've figured it out. And I always used to think the same amount of time I spent training, overnight, processing goes on. That's where you get the thing for free, and then it picks up the next day. And so the more you can get yourself in that situation, the more that effect has an opportunity to take place. Now, this is all relative. Most people are nowhere near full immersion. They're usually cruising along in their own life, and they're putting these little specks of new interest in their thing. So nowhere near this. So you can usually go a lot more. If you can start working your way toward a bit more immersion, you'll see a rapid increase in familiarity and orientation. Yeah. So those specific things, these early ones here, this is less about the deliberate practice for now. An example is, imagine navigating a new city around a hotel. If you're living there every day for a couple of weeks, how quickly do you start to recognize all the streets around you? It happens pretty quickly, doesn't it? If you went there once every month, you'd probably forget each time. So that's like the difference. So you're asking me, what if it's not practical to immerse yourself completely? I hear you. We'll cover that in a moment. And it's actually a really important piece. But first, what is the effect of increased exposure? Now, what happens here is as we increase immersion, what happens is learning doesn't increase yet. At the very low side of the scale, our brain deprioritizes the action. It's saying, oh, we're not doing it that often, so I might as well not allocate any resources to it. Keep increasing. There'll be a switching point where it starts to take it where it feels like it starts to take it seriously. Yeah, most don't give enough to start, so you don't experience a lot of that deep learning because you're not giving it enough exposure. An example might be going to a thing once a week, fortnightly, monthly classes. Now, I'm definitely guilty of this too in some activities where it's not been possible, and I experience a punishment too. If you keep going though, there's a period where you start getting really diminishing returns. You keep increasing the immersion, and your sense of learning doesn't actually increase that much. So there's this area here. Now remember that, okay? It's not practical to commit my life to this new hobby or this new project. Yep, that is a very fair point. So what we see is this: convenience, practicality on this side. At the beginning, as you immerse yourself, it's very easy to live with. It doesn't disrupt your life. But then as you increase the immersion, suddenly you can't squeeze it around your schedule. You actually have to start changing your schedule for it. It becomes more and more inconvenient. And then suddenly it becomes really inconvenient, somewhere around here. Then if you keep going, it starts taking over your life. And what happens? It becomes very impractical. So most don't want to disrupt comfort. We're just creatures of comfort. We like to reside in this point. This is why we always stay over here. It's difficult to move your life around it. And an example would be if you go to any type of class, music, sport, dance, learning languages or anything, you might take a class. It's very difficult to find time to practice. You have to kind of create these little windows and carve out time to practice. So we can often end up staying here, even if you're taking lessons. We need to get it somewhere along here. We can combine those two together, this chart here and this chart here. And you will get something like this, an optimal chart. This is one I've created where you gain the benefit of accelerated learning. Yep. So where the immersion starts to kick in and your brain goes, oh, this is our new thing, right? You're taking this pretty seriously, but not so much that it compromises your existence and then you're doing everything about this. It's being sustainable with your life, but also extracting this new brain capability. Over here, it's easy to do, but not enough. Your brain deprioritizes it. And on this side, it's great. You got lots of immersion, but it's inconvenient. You get diminishing returns and it compromises all of your other habits. Therefore, it's unsustainable, which means that you probably won't do it. And this is why people burn out when they just keep going to this side and then they can only do that for a couple of weeks and realize, a good example, I've seen this with clients where they buy one of those nutrition packs where you got to eat 8 meals a day and you do that. And they can do it for the first week and they realize, oh my God, I've got to do this thing every day for the next 6 months to lose my weight. I can't do that. It's too inconvenient. I've got things to do. I've got kids to look after. Yeah. We want to try and, in an ideal scenario, you'd be up here. In a realistic scenario, we want to operate here. So I think about an optimal one. So I do this for myself all the time. It's what enables me to get the gains of the exposure and the immersion without compromising lifestyle. And this is something that I focus on really heavily when I work with clients. We design it really meticulously so we can extract the most out of them whilst not making the changes so big that they can't sustain it. The sweet spot, the optimal sweet spot, I call it. So key points here. Increase exposure to activate your brain prioritization. And for most people, it's essentially as much as you can do because you're probably not doing enough anyway. Balance this out with practicality. When it starts to really impede in your life and you're switching out things to do it, we might need to tone it down a little bit. Do what you can sustain. You have to, it might take a few experiments to do it too.